This 62 Corvette has a 327 cubic inch engine that produces over 340 horsepower. In normal country driving, it gets 12 miles to the gallon of fuel. It is a powerful machine, a classic of automotive design and engineering. But this car pales in comparison to the complexity and efficiency of another machine. A living machine, the human body. This machine has not one engine, but billions. Engines contained in the cells that make up all living things.
All living things depend on energy. Living things need energy to move and to reproduce and grow. Without energy, we humans couldn't think or plan ahead. Without energy, life itself couldn't exist. All the different biochemical processes in which an organism acquires and uses energy, and which make possible all its activities, are known collectively as metabolism. But whether the organism is a human made up of billions of cells, or a paramecium consisting of only one cell, understanding metabolism requires looking at what happens inside cells.
Cells are like factories. In a factory like this automobile assembly line, products are made from hundreds of different parts and materials. A factory requires huge amounts of energy that is used to do different kinds of work. A definition of energy, in fact, is the capacity to do work. Like factories, cells use different materials to manufacture products, like proteins that help make new cells, and chemicals that living things need to function. Like factories, cells also need a steady source of energy to perform this work.
Without a supply of energy, any machine could no longer function. A car gets its energy by burning fuel, gasoline. If it runs out of gas, its high-performance engine becomes a useless collection of metal, plastic, and rubber parts. The body's cellular machines also depend on fuel that needs to be constantly replenished. This fuel is food. Without food, the cells in the body would stop functioning just as surely as an automobile stalls when it runs out of gas. But there are several important differences between the gasoline that fuels a car and the food that fuels the human body. One is that gasoline is a fuel that can be burned immediately by the car's engine. Food, on the other hand, has to go through a series of changes. For one thing, food has to be broken down into fragments before it can be used by cells.
This is the job of digestion. With the help of enzymes, the body's digestive system breaks up food into simpler compounds. Fats, like those in oil and cream, are chopped up into their molecular components, glycerol and fatty acids. Proteins, such as those in meat and dairy products, are broken down step by step into amino acids. And carbohydrates, like those in pasta and bread, are broken down into simple sugars, such as glucose. After digestion, the small molecules of nutrients pass into the body's circulatory system and are eventually absorbed by cells. Some of these molecules are used by cells as the raw materials to manufacture the products the body needs. The amino acids from proteins, for example, can reassemble to form new kinds of proteins, including proteins that are components of cells themselves and important chemicals.
But nutrient molecules also provide the fuel cells need. One molecule in particular, glucose, is the cell's primary source of energy. The energy stored in a molecule of glucose is called potential energy. Potential energy is energy that has the capacity to do work even though no work is being done. The potential energy in a molecule of glucose is like the potential energy in a gallon of gas. A gallon of gas has the potential to make this Corvette go 12 miles. When the car's engine is started and the car moves, the energy in the gasoline is released and becomes kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is energy that is actually being used to do work.
The potential energy of food is measured in units called kilocalories, or simply calories spelled with a capital C. A calorie is the amount of heat necessary to raise the temperature of 1 liter of water 1 degree Celsius. An apple, for example, has about 80 calories of potential energy. 180 grams of glucose has about 700 calories of potential energy. But inside the body, this energy could not be released or burned all at once without disastrous consequences. To understand why, think of what happens with other kinds of fuel. When you burn wood, for example, a great deal of energy is released very quickly as heat. Inside the body, burning glucose this quickly would release too much heat. Cells would melt down, and the body would incinerate itself. So glucose and other nutrient molecules are burned coolly. This is accomplished not all at once, but in a series of small steps with the help of many different enzymes.
One way of visualizing how energy is released in cells is to imagine a rock at the top of a platform with steps on one side and a sheer drop on the other. The rock represents potential energy that is released when it falls to the ground. If the rock is pushed to the left, all the energy is released at once. But if it is pushed to the right, the energy is released in small steps as it bounces down. In the same way, the energy in glucose is released not all at once, but in small steps.
Another way to think of glucose is as a form of energy currency, like a dollar bill. Cells are like vending machines that can't use this currency because it is too big. But they can transfer the energy in glucose bills to smaller change that can be used. This smaller change consists of molecules of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. ATP is the currency with which all energy transactions in the body's cells take place. The chemical structure of ATP consists of 1 unit of adenosine and 3 units of smaller phosphate molecules. The last 2 phosphate molecules are attached by high-energy bonds, and these bonds, particularly the last one, are the key for storing, transferring, and releasing energy. When a cell needs energy, the last bond can be broken, and the stored energy is released in the right amounts for the cell to use.
The energy released from ATP makes possible all the work of the body's different cells. ATP enables the muscle cells in a runner to move his legs, and for his heart to pump blood through his circulatory system. ATP makes it possible for nerve cells in the brain to transmit electrical and chemical messages that form our thoughts and perceptions.
When the last phosphate bond is broken and energy is released, ATP becomes ADP, or adenosine diphosphate. The ADP that remains is available to become ATP once again by adding energy and a phosphate group. So there is a cycle. ADP molecules receive a phosphate group and energy from the metabolism of glucose. This results in ADP becoming ATP. The energy stored in ATP is used for the work of the cell when ATP gives up a phosphate group. This causes ATP to become ADP, and the process begins again. In a cell, this cycle repeats over and over again, many times a second.
The carefully controlled process by which the energy in glucose is transferred to ATP is known as cellular respiration. In the cells of all higher forms of animal life, cellular respiration occurs in two major stages, anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration. The first stage, anaerobic respiration, occurs in the cell's cytoplasm. Anaerobic means that it takes place without the presence of oxygen. This stage is also called glycolysis. In anaerobic respiration, a molecule of glucose is split into two molecules of pyruvic acid. Through this process, there is a net gain of two molecules of ATP that can be used for energy. Anaerobic respiration also results in energy-rich hydrogen atoms from glucose being transferred to molecules of a chemical called NAD. NAD is called a carrier molecule because each NAD carries a hydrogen atom. Later, we'll see how NAD releases these hydrogen atoms in the last stages of aerobic respiration. If you think of 180 grams of glucose as a kind of sponge containing 700 calories of potential energy, anaerobic respiration manages to squeeze out only 20 calories of energy in ATP. By itself, anaerobic respiration is a very inefficient way of obtaining energy from glucose. It's as if our Corvette got less than half a mile per gallon of gas when it has the potential of getting 12 miles per gallon.
There are times, however, when anaerobic respiration provides most of a cell's energy, particularly during intense bursts of exercise, such as sprinting. While sprinting, a runner may not be able to breathe in oxygen quickly enough to meet the demands of her muscle cells. But her muscles can rely on anaerobic respiration for only a short time. The pyruvic acid that results from the breakdown of glucose itself breaks down into lactic acid. As lactic acid accumulates, it causes feelings of great fatigue in the muscles. Gasping for breath, the sprinter soon has to stop running so that her aching muscles can have a chance to get more oxygen. Breathing provides the oxygen necessary for the second, more efficient stage of cellular respiration, aerobic respiration. When we breathe, oxygen diffuses from our lungs into the circulatory system, which carries it to cells throughout the body. But during aerobic respiration, this oxygen isn't immediately used in the body cells. A complex series of other steps occurs first.
Recall that among the products of anaerobic respiration are two molecules of pyruvic acid. In the first few steps of aerobic respiration, each pyruvic acid is broken down into a molecule of acetic acid. During this process, carbon dioxide is released and enters the bloodstream, which carries it back to the lungs where it is exhaled. In addition, hydrogen atoms from each pyruvic acid are transferred to a carrier molecule of NAD. The energy in these hydrogens will later be used to make ATP in the final stages of aerobic respiration.
Each acetic acid then enters tiny organelles or structures in a cell called mitochondria. These organelles are frequently called the powerhouses of the cell because within mitochondria occur many of the chemical reactions that make energy available for the cell's work. Mitochondria provide an orderly environment for enzymes involved in turning the energy in acetic acid into the energy stored in ATP. When acetic acid enters a mitochondrion, it links with a chemical called coenzyme A, producing acetyl coenzyme A, or acetyl-CoA for short. acetyl-CoA moves to an area of the mitochondrion where a series of chemical reactions called the Krebs cycle occurs. In simplified terms, what happens is that acetyl-CoA releases acetic acid, which enters the Krebs cycle. The coenzyme A is then free to pick up another acetic acid molecule. In the Krebs cycle, molecules are rearranged. CO2 is released, and for each of the two acetic acid molecules from the original glucose, one ATP is produced. Most importantly, however, energy-carrying hydrogen atoms are removed and transferred to carrier molecules of NAD. Hydrogen atoms are also transferred to another carrier molecule called FAD. Since each glucose molecule produces two acetic acid molecules, the cycle occurs a second time as another acetic acid enters the Krebs cycle.
At this point, an accounting of how many ATP molecules have been produced may be helpful. From a single molecule of glucose, 2 ATPs have been formed during anaerobic respiration. During anaerobic respiration, 2 pyruvic acid molecules were also formed. In aerobic respiration, the 2 pyruvic acid molecules were broken down into acetic acid molecules. These entered the Krebs cycle, where 2 more ATPs were formed, 1 from each acetic acid. This gives a total of 4 ATP. This means that of the 700 calories of potential energy in the original 180 grams of glucose, only 40 have been released as ATP. Still not very efficient. If the Corvette were only this efficient, for example, it would still be getting less than 1 mile to the gallon.
Most of the energy from the glucose is still stored in hydrogen atoms that are now carried by molecules of NAD and FAD. We'll follow what happens with hydrogen carried by NAD. In the final stage of cellular respiration, the hydrogens give up their electrons, which then become involved in a series of reactions called the electron transport chain. In the electron transport chain, the high-energy electrons each undergo a series of chemical reactions. These form a kind of energy stairway, where at each step, the electrons give up some of their energy. The energy that is released is used to form 32 additional ATP. At the end of the electron transport chain, the energy-poor electrons join with hydrogen ions. 2 of the resulting hydrogen atoms combine with an oxygen atom from the air we breathe. This chemical combination forms water. It is only at this endpoint that oxygen plays its role in aerobic respiration.
Once again, let's do some accounting. Through anaerobic respiration alone, the cell could obtain from each molecule of glucose only 2 molecules of ATP to use for energy. 2 passes of the Krebs cycle produce 2 additional ATP. And the electron transport chain results in another 32 ATP. Altogether, from both aerobic and anaerobic respiration, a total of 36 molecules of ATP are obtained from each molecule of glucose. Put another way, if we started with 180 grams of glucose with 700 calories of potential energy, 380 calories are released as energy in ATP. In other words, about 54% of the potential energy in glucose is converted to energy that does work. Most of the rest of the potential energy is lost as heat. In comparison, the average automobile engine today is much less efficient. The cell, in fact, is more efficient than any engine that modern technology has yet devised.
Up to now, we have focused on glucose as the cell's primary source of fuel. We saw that when glucose is broken down, an important product is acetic acid. But both lipids and proteins can be broken down along their own metabolic pathways to produce acetic acid. Whatever route is taken to reach acetic acid, it can then join with coenzyme A to form acetyl-CoA. The acetyl-CoA then moves to the Krebs cycle, where it releases the acetic acid, which then becomes involved in other chemical reactions that result in the production of ATP.
Although the precise process may vary slightly, all living things depend on cellular respiration and the production of ATP. No matter what their size, color, or shape, living things depend on their cellular factories to acquire and use the energy essential for their survival. Cellular respiration is truly the fire of life.